5 years ago, sir, I was in Afghanistan. And the last point on the debt ceiling. All right. I will turn it now over to the moderator, and it's question and answer time. Thank you.
Hello, Congressman. The first two questions are in similar vein. The first question is from Chip Thomas from Jupiter. What would we have to do to convince you to enter the presidential race? The second question from Jimmy Lizzie and Carol Hurst of Palm Beach Shores. Will you run in 2012 and save us and the country? We give you permission.
The most important thing is this. I won a congressional race, and my responsibility is to the people here in Congressional District 22. And my father taught me a very important maxim growing up in Georgia. And I'm sorry, I have to laugh. The lady has print tape over her mouth. But my father gave me a very important maxim. He said, "Never read your own press and never drink your own tumble water." So I stay pretty focused on being a good congressional representative, and that's the most important thing.
The next question is regarding employment labor. Michael Duval of Fort Lauderdale asks, what are your thoughts of the National Labor Relations Board and their decision regarding the Boeing factory in South Carolina?
I think that's a terrible decision. And if you all did not pay attention to that, what the National Labor Relations Board is trying to prevent is a private sector company from relocating to a right-to-work state. And you have to understand, Florida is a right-to-work state. So, we cannot have these type of impediments that will not allow Americans to be hired and for Americans to get out there and do their job, do work. And you know what? I want to see us producing aircraft here for our men and women that are out there. I don't want to see us
Regarding taxes, Joyce Brown from Newcomb asks, why not tax the most wealthy in this country their fair share and leave the working class and middle class with the benefits they have paid for and earned?
Well, first of all, the thing is fair share. I mean, that's a very objective thing. I mean, how do we define fair share? Right now, those top two tax brackets are paying upwards to about 45 to 50% of the taxes in the United States of America. And when you look at the progressive tax code system that we have, on tax day, you have 47% of wage earning households that did not pay federal income taxes. So you basically have 53% that are paying for the rest of this country. Now, let's give a little bit of history. When you go back and you look at Presidents Coolidge and Harding, we talk about the marginal tax rates for the upper brackets. They brought those marginal tax rates down to 24%. You saw a percentage of revenues as per GDP increase coming from those tax brackets. But then following them, you had Hoover and you had Roosevelt, who took it from 24%, they brought it up to 83%. And you can understand exactly what happened to that percentage of revenues. Even John F. Kennedy, when he took over as president, He saw those marginal tax rate at 91%. And he said we have to at least cut it down 20% to 71%. The thing is very simple, and I just talked about it. Small business owners operate at a personal income tax rate. And if we're talking about setting the conditions for people to get hired and people to get back to work, the last thing you want to do is start talking about raising taxes in the situation in which we find ourselves. You're not going to grow the economy. It is not, once again, it is not a revenue problem that we have at the federal government level. It's the spending problem. And the thing is this. Let me ask everyone one simple question. Why would you trust this federal government with more American taxpayer dollars? Do you think they're going to be So that's it. The surplus in 2000, let's talk about how you create a surplus. You create a surplus very simple. You can have tax cuts, but you can't grow government at the same time. And that's one of the great things that Bill Clinton did, along with Bill Gates. They did not grow government. And also, remember about welfare reform. Welfare reform came under Bill Clinton. Okay? You talk about services. Now, the failure of George W. Bush, you cannot have tax cuts and grow government at the same time. That's how you take a surplus and you turn it into a deficit. But the thing is now, in the past 3 years, we have seen those deficits absolutely explode. The largest annual deficit of George W. Bush was $400 billion. That was the largest annual deficit. In this month of February of this year, we had $223 billion of deficit spending in the shortest month of the year. And I already told you about the 3 years that we've had as far as deficit spending. So I agree that the thing that we have to do is we have to take care of the spending in Washington, D.C. That's the bottom line.
Okay, also regarding taxes, Valerie T. Ellis of Boca Raton asked, at your last town hall in Palm Beach, Representative West, you mentioned that the upper 1% deserve a tax rate because they drive the economy. Where would they go without the other 99%?
Yeah. Well, I don't know where they will go. And it's not about having a tax break. I mean, we're talking about keeping tax rates where they are. Now, this is another thing that I believe in. I believe in the flat tax. I believe in across the board, 15 to 70%, 15 to 17% tax rate, and the only deduction you get is children. So I think the most important thing is, across the board, all Americans infuse money into their pockets. And I think that is the way that we will have long-term sustainable economic growth. The thing that I hear people shouting about is never worked. It's not worked in this country. If you're talking about top-down driven government type of economy, it's never worked. And we can sit down and we can talk about it anyway. Okay? And the exact same thing. You can talk, if you go back and you study the Secretary of Treasury for President Roosevelt, I think it was Henry Morgan now, he will tell you that everything that we did failed as far as getting us out of the Depression. Every single one of their economic policies. And that's what now, the way we just said, let the troops back home. I have been overseas, in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I do not agree with nation building or occupational salary welfare because it does bring down your economic resources. But also know this, that we have a very ambitious, a very determined, a very focused enemy that is out there. And if we don't develop our United States military for this 21st century fight, then we're going to miss out. And this enemy will continue to grow in the sanctuaries that we see established. The number one thing we should be doing is denying this in the sanctuary. We should be cutting off this flow of material and financial support. The longer that you stay bogged down in some of these theaters of operations, the more that your men and women become target. And that's something that I don't want to see happen. And that's why I'm going back over to Afghanistan in June.
Right, the next question, is rather lengthy. I'm gonna read it anyway. Judith Kraft of Mining Breezes. It's regarding the state budget. The state money should not be cut from the federal budget, especially for Department of Children and Families, since it is the only agency concerned with the well-being of the neediest people. Those who have income problems need Medicaid, food stamps. The application online is unfriendly, very stressful, and there's no human contact to help you with questions. When mistakes are made, they can't be corrected online or by group into the main office. Services are denied with no recourse. Privatizing has made it too fragmented. The people who fall through the cracks have to survive on their own. I am a social worker with a grown daughter who has had mental health problems, which have disabled her for the past 2.5 years, and she was denied Social Security, disability income, therefore ineligible for Medicaid because she has no disability. A fair hearing, which may take 1 year or more in Palm Beach County, has failed. She can't afford this. Is there someone who can address the situation?
Well, I mean, county and state level issues like that, the only thing I can do is say, come in and sit down with people on our staff, and we'll see what we can do in connecting with your state representative, state senator, and do the best we can. But, you know, once again, it comes back to prioritize what are the functions of the federal government so that we can make sure that we keep all of our Americans at a certain standard of living and a certain standard of life. And I think one of the key things we have to do as the federal government is realize, you know, where do we support the state so that they can take the lead, make sure that they have the right funding and revenues to be able to take care of their citizens. I don't think that we can do as good a job up there at the 30,000-foot level as the states can be able to do. So whoever you are, please come back and see someone from our office. We'll get your information and we'll do the best we can.
Regarding the federal budget, Diane DeWolf, why is the Department of Agriculture spending money to photograph children's school lunches in San Antonio to measure their calories?
I mean, you know, there's a lot of things that I'm responsible for, but taking pictures of school lunches is not one. All I can do is I'll go back and talk to my friends on the Committee on Agriculture, and I'll ask them what they're doing. Hey, look, let me tell you something that you all have to do as citizens out there. You all have to hold us responsible and accountable. I mean, it's very easy to track where the spending is. It's very easy to track some of these wasteful things that happen in Washington, D.C. And you need to be contacting people on these various and some of these different committees and let them know what you're doing. Why are we getting rid of earmarks? Well, I got to tell you, there are no earmarks. And let me tell you, when you watched us go through the National Defense Authorization Act, once upon a time, everyone would come and say, I need $25 million to go to this military base, which is in my district. That didn't happen this time. And even at 3 o'clock in the morning, that hearing room was still packed with people that were watching us to see what we were doing. And they were going over those amendments that we brought forth. So you're not seeing earmarks up there. Earmarks is a bad word. Well, we shall keep doing it.
From Laura Parson, at the last town hall, you correctly stated that Social Security did not contribute to the deficit. Why didn't you talk about it when speaking about the debt?
Well, I think that the thing that you have to realize, if you look at the chart, we don't have enough Americans that are paying into the system to continue to make Social Security viable. So what have we ended up doing? We ended up borrowing money to make sure that Social Security is viable. One of the terrible things that happened, Social Security once upon a time was in an independent trust fund account. And when it was taken out of an independent trust fund account, and it was used, as the gentleman was saying, for wasteful spending and earmarks and things of that nature. Now we have rated it, and it's an IOU program. And then the other thing is that we don't have enough Americans that are out there working to help to replenish it. So the biggest thing we got to do, get Americans back to work, get it back replenished, get it back into an independent trust fund account, so we don't have politicians up there raping it for future generations. So those are the things that we have to do with Social Security.
protecting large corporate tax cuts and loopholes, who's going to stand up for the working people?
Well, I think I stand up for the working people and saying that I want working people to get back to work. I think that's the whole part of the small business experience. You know, obviously people don't understand who I am. Because I've always said, I wouldn't give anybody a bailout. Because if you're in the corporate sector, you have bad business practices, guess what? You go away. That's part of the deal. I say that you flatten it out 20 to 22%. What I've always said, get rid of loopholes. Get rid of the subsidies. I mean, one of the most heinous subsidy out there is the corn ethanol subsidy. Yeah. So those are the type of things that I always believed in. And you know, go down and talk to some of these local community banks. They're getting crushed. But it's the big banks that the government is popping up. It's the big banks that people want to bear with. I mean, follow the money of Goldman Sachs. Look at how many people from Goldman Sachs are working up in Washington, D.C. If you have an administration, if you have people in Washington, D.C. that start to pick the winners and the losers, that's not the free market. That's not free market. No subsidies, no bailouts, none of this stuff. And both sides of it.
From Fred Scheibel of Palm Beach County, given that we have reached the debt limit, the Treasury plans to raise the employee pension fund. Can Congress insist they cut spending instead?
You know, one of the frustrating things that I have is that, you know, it seems every time some of this stuff happens, they send most of us out of Washington, D.C. And I'm very concerned about what could happen while Congress is not in session. We don't need to be raiding pension funds. I'm telling you, the thing that we have to do is we've got to turn the spotlight on us up there in Washington, D.C. I just said there's $200 billion of duplicative programs in Washington, D.C. that a report said, and no one did a thing about it. That's a great starting point that we can launch on. You know, when you look at the 13 different appropriations bills that the House of Representatives produces, and I said this before, there's no priority on those appropriations bills. What's the most important appropriations bill? What's the essential function of government? What's the priorities? You know, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. And that's the frustrating thing that I've seen in Washington, D.C. is that, you know, we get to the point where we're talking about shutting down the government. People don't understand what's essential, what's non-essential. I mean, this is, you know, the kind of stuff that people taught me as a second lieutenant back in 1982, 83, but we're not doing it. So I thoroughly agree. We should not be talking about raiding pension funds. And I'll also give you a case in point. 1985, 1995, and 2002. Three previous occasions where we went beyond the debt limit. And we lasted for like 4.5, 5 months. Okay? Let's not get caught up in the scare tactics. Let's not get caught up in fear mongering. Because, you know, we can resolve this. But the thing is that if we don't take the right type of actions in Washington, D.C., it's not going to make any difference.
From Emily Christina Genovich. I am concerned about those of us under 54 that have spent more than 30 years paying into Medicare. To now change the rules, don't you think it's kind of Bernie Madoff of you?
No, I don't think it's Bernie Madoff, but I tell you what, and the option is we do nothing. And then in 2024, you know, come see me when there is no Medicare program, because that's the possibility that we're running into. So I'm 50 years of age, and I know that something has to change for me as we go forward, or else, as I said, there will not be a Medicare. There will not be the ability of this government to own up to the promises that it made to the seniors. So I think that it'd be very easy for me to come down here and tell you that everything's fine, there's nothing to worry about, but I can't lie to you. And I will not lie to you. We have to do something to reform these programs and take it from a fee-for-service to a defined contribution. And then we've got to start turning the spotlight on the fraud, waste, and abuse that are in these programs, being Medicare and Medicaid. If you look at where South Florida ranks, we're pretty high. for the progress and use on those two programs.
From Shelley D. Nonis of Lantana, how can you take away my medicine when I have paid into it throughout my life?
I'm not taking away anything. We're not. But I think that if we don't reform this program, it won't be there for you. And that's the challenge that we face. And I don't know how many times I can show you the facts, show you the numbers, but something has to be done, or else, as the Medicare trustees said last Friday, 2024, that's 13 years. It's not going to be here.
Don't take it away from my children either.
We're trying to make sure it's there for you.
From Jennifer Kelly of Jacksonville, what do you think of Medicare as vouchers, and what do you think of raising the retirement age?
Well, like I said, it's not a voucher. Like I said, it's a defined contribution. And then when you look at, what's the second part again? Steps and bowls. I mean, if you look at that 65 to 69, that makes a difference. For the debt and deficit curve. We're living out to 78 years of age. And, we have to start looking at those different types of alternatives. But I think right now, no one's talking about doing anything different with Social Security. No one's talking about doing anything different with retirement age. But we do have to do something as far as the Medicare and then the Medicaid. I mean, if we take it and we turn it over to the states, we block grant and let them run it, there'll be a whole lot of savings in that program to make it viable, and they can provide the right type of services for the people that need the Medicaid. So those are the options that are out there, and I think those are very viable options as we go forward.
What about raising retirement age by not taxing people on the income that they earn?
Well, the thing is, it's funny, and I'll answer this. It's funny when, everyone said that, those no good, rotten, what's up there in Congress, they need to have the same type of health care as everyone else. So all of a sudden, we come up with a solution that provides people the same type of health care program that a member of Congress has. The options that I have to go out to Blue Cross Blue Shield, people still don't like that. So I don't know what it's going to take to make the American people happy. Okay? But I do know this. If we don't, and like I said once again, I tell you what, let's do nothing. Okay? And then we'll see what happens. Okay? But we have to look at some viable options as we go forward. And this is right now. If you're in the system, if you're 55, nothing changes. But something has to change for my generation, or else there's not going to be anything. It's interesting.
Don't mess with my children.
I have children also. But the interesting thing is this. Back in the late 1970s, the government came up with a program that everyone thought was going to be a fantastic program. Everyone was cheering. Both sides. We created agencies to make sure that it would stay strong and be viable. That program was called a Community Redevelopment Act. We created Fannie and Freddie. Everyone continued to support it. We took the Glass-Steagall Act and we got rid of it, which blurred the lines between commercial banks and investment banks. And then 30 years later, we had an incredible meltdown. But yet at the beginning, everyone said how great the Community Reinvestment Act was going to be because every American would have a right to own a home. So I don't know what to end up happening, but I know this: that if we don't do something with reforming these programs, it will be a huge fiscal crisis, and it will be a health care crisis for the United States of America and its citizens.
Jupiter has concerns regarding questionable wars, loaded military budgets, wasteful military spending, common deaths and injuries, torture. His question is, do you propose to substantially cut military spending?
Well, you're looking at a guy who has found 3 programs that total up to, I think about, let's see, close to 200 some odd, no, more than about $300 or $400 million of spending of DOD, 3 programs we found ways for spending. Now, I gotta tell you something. I cannot look at the men and women, my brothers and sisters, and to include my nephew, and send them into battle and not have them properly trained, equipped, and ready to conduct operations. Why do you think the Navy SEALs were so ready and prepared to conduct the operations that they did? We have the best trained, best equipped military, but we cannot turn our backs on it. One of the things that is really concerning to me is a lot of people on Capitol Hill think that now that you killed Osama bin Laden, it's the end of it. That's a very dangerous premise to believe. Now, as I said, I do believe that we have to get away from this thing called nation building. I do believe that we need to be telling the defense military industry what the warfighter needs and not them telling us what they want to produce. That's very important. And once again, when people talk about GE, how many people recognize the fact that GE just last week circumvented the defense procurement system by saying that they would fund this alternate engine themselves, which means that somewhere down the line, we're going to have 2 different engine systems for the Joint Strike Fighter, the F-35, because GE didn't want to play by the rules. And that's the type of thing that should not happen. And I will tell you, the CEO of GE Aviation came to my office, and I told him that I was not going to support them having that alternate engine. Those are the type of things that we have to be able to do to prevent that military industry complex from being successful, telling the military what they want them to have. But remember this, in 1990, and this is an incredible statistic, in 1990, the United States military had 546 naval war vessels. Today, the United States Navy has 283 naval war vessels. How much of the mass of this earth is water? The fact that we are dealing with people called pirates in the 21st century is absolutely reprehensible. If we don't understand that the important part of a nation's ability to protect its